Welcome everybody to another edition of Think with a Drink. This is the financial web series brought to you by the ARIES Foundation for Financial Education. Today's episode, we are going to talk about, Craig, the importance of credit, or understanding credit and how it works and what's behind it, and maybe a little bit about why it's important to everybody to have a handle on just what your credit score is.
Sure. That sounds like fun.
Sounds like fun. Next slide. So my name is Tom Alessi. I am the president of the ARIES Foundation for Financial Education. I have been in financial services for 24, I'm actually into my 25th year now, Craig. I'm an investment advisor. That means I act as a fiduciary whenever I'm giving guidance or advice to any of my clients. I want to bring Vice President Craig, if you can introduce yourself.
Sure. So I'm Craig Richardson. I'm the Vice President of ARIES Foundation. And be careful who takes your picture. You never know where it's going to end up. So
I slipped that in. He wasn't supposed to see that.
I've been doing this for 20 years. And I specialize in working with families and individuals to help them define their financial goals and have a better relationship with their money.
Sure, I thought I threw that fastball by you. Next slide, please. So we told you that Think with a Drink is brought to you by the ARIES Foundation for Financial Education. You can visit us on the web. It's ariesfoundation.org. Our mission behind ARIES is trying to help everyone have a better relationship with their money. Because whether you realize it or not, you are actually in a relationship with your money. And just like every other personal relationship that you have, there are behaviors and triggers and things that cause us to act, well, sometimes a little irrationally when it comes to handling our money and our finances. All myself, Craig, the rest of the ARIES team, that we try to do is help everyone sort of take a step back, take some of that emotion out of that equation of dealing with your money. Next slide. So you can follow us. We on just about it, except for TikTok, Craig. Every social media channel out there. So we're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, Instagram. Do us a favor. If you happen to be or follow or go on any of these social media channels, look us up. We're happy to have you check us out, follow us, like us, whatever they do. I don't know what else they do on those.
I
right?
don't know.
But no TikTok.
Kids. I'll have to ask my kids.
There you go. Ask a young person what they do with all of that. But the idea is if you could follow us on social media, it would certainly be appreciated. Next slide. So the agenda for today, real quick, we touch on, this is Think with a Drink after all, what we're drinking today. We're going to go through the types of credit that are available, your FICO score, how that all works.
Oh, good.
This segment that we call Misbehaving with Money Minute, long-term implications of your credit, some tips, things you can do to sort of get around and handle on that, and then at the end, a little bit of a call to action for everybody.
Fantastic.
Okay, so first slide. So, what we're drinking, this is Think with a Drink after all. We are drinking Sam Adams. This is their new Hoppy Lager. This is included in the Fall Fest package that you can get, which has, a lot of fun stuff in it. Hoppy Lager, a little lighter, a little, fruitier based on what's going on in today with, usually go into the fall lagers, the darker, heavier beers, the Oktoberfest, the Fest beers, and those type of things. It's a nice alternative. It works out pretty well. But for everybody out there, skål.
Skål. And don't worry, be hoppy.
Yes. That's somebody else's, but that's okay. We'll keep the hoppiness going. Next slide. All right, so credit, when you come right down to it, is your ability to borrow money from somebody else, right? Ultimately, as you come around there, it allows you to purchase things that you don't have the money for today.
Right.
Right? This is a good thing when we're talking about it for certain purchases and leveraging and all of that, but can also get us in a lot of trouble.
Oh, yes, very quickly.
And so, part of this is realizing that while credit card companies and banks and others make money available to us through these lines of credit, it's not necessarily in everyone's best interest to be using them.
Right.
Depending on what it is we're trying to do with it.
Correct.
Yeah. You wanted to say something else to that?
No, I'm going to wait.
Okay.
I'm going to keep everybody anticipating.
Yeah, there you go.
What's he going to say?
What's he going to say? Next slide. All right, so you have really two different types of credit that's out there. You've got that revolving credit, and you have an installment version, right? So revolving credit, if you think about this is like your credit cards, store cards, those type of things. It's sort of open-ended to a point. Like I pay it off, I get it back. If I had a $2,000 limit at Target or something, right? I spend $1,000, I only have $1,000, but once I pay it off, I've got $2,000.
So I have so much that's available, and as I use it, the amount of what's available goes away until I pay off that balance.
That's the revolving, right? Installment is your mortgage, right? The car payment. This is a set schedule of payments. I am paying this off, paying this down over the time period that is set up. Until I get to the end. There's no, we're adding more on or additional pieces in there.
Right. I don't get more credit back as I pay it down.
You don't get more credit back. That's a different conversation about opening up lines, other ways
That was the
of
first
doing
thing we
that.
talked about.
Or
lines
I
of
don't
credit,
get,
right?
my car doesn't extend, right? I don't get a bigger car.
Oh, that's terrible.
So understand two different types of credit that are out there. You've got this revolving, and then you've got the installment payments. Usually the installments, those are where we're talking about more of that good debt, like I'm purchasing something that hopefully is going to accrue in value out over time. Usually with revolving credit, these are things that we are buying. Sometimes, like we talked about in the open with Aries, a little irrationally, because this is giving us a feeling of joy, that the dopamine hit, I'm feeling good, I bought something.
Right. But there's also a lot of practical reasons for having that, which I'm sure
yeah,
you're going to get into shortly.
Listen, we understand. It's a plastic world out there. You really are not going to go anywhere or do anything without having a credit card, right? There's certain things that you just can't do. In fact, we were just at one. We were at Gillette, for a Patriots game, and it's completely, it's cashless. It's a plastic thing. You can't spend $1 in there. You have to use a credit card.
Right, yes. And that's, true of a lot of things. I mean, if you go to rent a car, right, you can't do it without a credit card.
Right.
Right. You go to book a hotel room nowadays. You can't even do that with the cash anymore. And that's because they want to know that, if for some reason you do incur an expense, it's covered. So that may even be something you're even paying for. It may just be putting a deposit down on something to make sure that you don't cause an issue or there's someone who gets covered in case there's an issue.
Absolutely. Next slide. Right, so, why does it matter? And I think this is one of those realities, Craig, that comes up for a lot of people, is that realizing, well, I didn't really think about it or care about it until I tried to get qualified for, purchasing a car, purchasing a home, doing something on those matters, right? That's where suddenly now your credit history, how you've behaved with your money, comes into play to everybody.
Absolutely. I mean, credit in itself can be a very powerful financial tool. Even if you take just the example that you had on the board about, college education, right? You may not be able to pay out of pocket for your tuition, room, board, all those things you need to get through college. But if you can get a loan and leverage somebody else's money to get an education, well, that education over your lifetime is worth far more than the loan you took out.
Correct.
Right, so you're leveraging that money to get you into a better situation.
Yeah.
Same thing if you bought a home, right? You're buying a home with somebody else's money, paying back over time, but you're getting appreciation and all that in the property. So once again, using credit the right way is a very powerful financial tool in the right direction.
Yes.
But
there are times that it does come in, so you just do want to be aware of that. But the idea here is, and we're going to talk about the credit scores in the next slides in terms of what they mean, how they come about. But I think that's the reality for a lot of people, is they don't think about this, especially, I don't want to say, hey, young people, right? But younger people tend to think, well, okay, I didn't pay that bill, or I was late on those payments,
so
or whatever
what?
the case. Right, so what? Who cares, right? And that's ultimately, those are all things that take away from your credit score, which when you go to apply or try to get that mortgage, even rental right? Even
Oh,
trying to
yeah.
rent an apartment nowadays, they're going to take your credit score into an effect.
You go to buy life insurance, they do a credit score check.
So there's a lot of factors there. So next slide. Right, so Fair Isaac's reporting, that's the FICO, what it is. Generally, a FICO score will come in anywhere from like 300 to
800?
Yeah, I think it's 850 or 900 nowadays. Like
Really?
They keep raising it. But generally, that score is a basis. It's not necessarily everything that they're looking at. It's a basis, it's a number. It does certainly warrant, and in terms of going through everything, I want to say it's somewhere above 730 is excellent, right? Somewhere in the 680 to 730 range is good, and then anybody under that, right, you're having problems, right? That's where specifically if we're talking about somebody within the mid to high fives to that 690 range or 680 range, that's where you're having a lot of struggle,
Right.
because you're considered at risk. You're considered a average or below average in terms of your rating.
Right, so the whole FICO score really is just to give whoever is looking at extending you credit an idea of how much risk they're taking on. What's the likelihood you're going to pay back the credit that they gave you? And if you're higher the credit score, it means the more often and more favorable you pay it back.
Right.
Right, they're not chasing you, your payments are on time, maybe they're ahead of time. They know that when they lend money to you, they're going to get it back and their interest. If you have a lower score, well, it means you have a higher risk.
Yeah.
Right? There's a chance they may not get all of their money back. And so that, that can also have other issues where they may not extend you the credit, or it may cost you a lot more money.
Right, and that's usually the factor there, is that what happens is that cost of lending goes up dramatically. And so suddenly you find yourself in a situation where like, oh, I can get the loan, but now it's going to cost me 1.5 points more than what I would have gotten had I been in that good or excellent range.
Right. Two people walk into an auto dealership, they buy the exact same vehicle, the exact same price. One has a credit score of 780, the other has a credit score of 580. They both walk out with the vehicle, but one's payment's 25% higher than the other. Right? And so that's the issue there. That's why that's so important.
Right, and so that's something that you need to be thinking about in terms of dealing with and looking at how those credit scores are done. We're going to talk about that in a couple of slides as we go forward with this and to be going through it. One of the things that we're going to do right now is we've been introducing this misbehaving with money minute, as we call it. So if you can go to the next slide. Oh, I didn't know we are going to stay in the FICO. There I go. I was ahead of myself.
Well, it's
Look
okay.
at that.
We'll stay in the FICO.
No, it's okay. Go back. We're going to stay in the FICO if you can. Just go back. We'll stay with FICO for a second. Thank you. Sorry
Stop that.
about
Reverse
that. It's
that.
all right. It happens. we go move too fast sometimes. So that just gives you the ranges there. So like, see, it says 850.
850, okay.
Yeah, well, there we
All
go. So as we said, 740 to 800, very good. Then you get exceptional, 670 to 740. So we were pretty good with that in terms of good. And then, like I said, when you get into the orange and certainly the red, that's where the conversation that we're talking about, right? Those are the steps. Those are the ones that you need to be really taking a look at what it is you've done and what you need to do to improve.
Right. And that's the other thing, too, is remember, like we've said in other episodes, whatever you've done, missteps you've taken in the past, you can only go from where you are right now.
Right.
And there are ways to fix almost everything in the financial world.
Yes.
So
you can always do the steps to make it happen. Okay, now we're going to go to the misbehaving with money minute.
okay.
All right, so misbehaving with money minute. This is really what happens is Craig and I run into a lot of folks. We have a lot of conversations, and every now and then something comes up or an action or thing that we keep hearing over and over and over again. They were like, wait a minute, this sounds the same story that we've heard time and time again. And so we just want to address some things that come up as part of that, some steps to be thinking about. If you're doing this, most of the time it's stop doing it and find an alternative to it. So if you want to click the slide, the misbehaving with money minute for this episode is
A mystery. Oh.
no, next slide. There we go. Paying the minimum. So we stuck the credit card one in here because we're dealing with FICO and the credit
Right.
scores and everything else, right? So this is paying the minimum on your credit card because it dramatically increases the cost. Like if you look at what it costs you to have this item, when we're looking about interest being paid, right? If you go out 5 years, you've added it's like 40% or 50% of the cost of the item by dragging it out for 5 years.
Yeah, maybe even more than that. I mean, if you look at some of their credit card rates today, they're 20, 22, 23% on average, right? So you could be doubling or tripling the cost of the original item by taking a few years to pay it off.
Right, by just paying on the minimum. The other is your credit score. Part of it is based on how much available rating, how much money you have
Available as
credit. And so if you're not paying it back, what a lender is seeing is that, well, you had $2,000, but you know what, $1,200 of it's still outstanding, so there isn't a lot there. So your percentage, the amount is not a big open number for them. That limits your credit score.
Right.
So that's another factor with it. So the idea here is, and one of the things we talk to everybody about, is trying to find the ways that you can figure out to pay additional amounts on top of whatever that minimum is to get it paid back. We do a whole thing on debt. You can go to the foundation, you can go check out the website. We do a whole thing on ways to tackle debt and the different process to use with it. But just some of the things there, because absolutely that's going to trip you up if you continue to just pay the minimum amounts.
Right, and you help yourself in two ways. Number one, you're going to pay a lot less interest if you get that under control, so you're going to have more money in your pocket. And two, if you get under control, your credit score is going to go up, which means the next time you need to borrow money, it's going to cost you less. So good incentives to kind of get that under control.
So that's the misbehaving with Money Minute for this episode. So if you can go to the next slide. All right, so the factors determining your credit score. So understand they're looking at your payment history. If you are missing payments or you are late on payments, that is going to affect it dramatically. The amounts that you owed, like we just talked about, if you've got these open amounts, it's going to take away from your score. Credit history. This is one, this is one of those little, sneaky ones, like in terms of dealing with it. So if you had a credit card that you opened like when you were in your 20s and now you're later in years in your 30s or 40s, but you still got that credit card, don't close it because it's a length of history. The minute you close it, you don't get active, it's no longer active. So if you have to do a minimum to keep it up, a lot of times it's something on there. Not that we want to go back to the subscriptions. We talked about that in another episode. You can look at the money minutes and keeping the subscriptions, but it might be just put one of your monthly ongoing subscriptions on that one card just so it stays active.
Or even if you're debating, should I rent or own a property? Sometimes owning the property improves your credit score because you develop a longer credit history. Right. So not only do you get the equity, and not only do you get the permanence and all that of it, but you also increase your credit score.
And then the last one there is the types of credit that are used, right? So again, we talked about revolving versus installment because they want to know that you're purchasing and paying things off, but also what you're purchasing for. So all of these factor into it. So just be aware, all of these things that you're doing, they will affect your history, and you just got to be aware of that as you are spending and using. Next slide. All right, so what are the risks that go along with credit, right? So we talked about debt, right? Incurring too much debt. It is very, very easy to push the button, right, and get that thing sent to us the next day or whatever, and it looks like Christmas on my doorstep every other day with all the Amazon packages that show up.
Well, yeah, I think you're right. On the smaller items, that is an issue. You have an open credit card and you spend it to the limit, and then someone gives you another credit card and you put that one to the limit. I think what we saw bigger issues though were, back when we had the mortgage crisis back in 2008, when people were giving these huge credit lines to buy homes, not really verifying if people could afford them. Right. So that was a big issue. The same thing if you go to buy a vehicle, they just go, well, how much can we get you into? They don't care if you can keep making the payment or not because they're trying to sell you something. So you need to be aware of what works for you and your budget, what you're comfortable with and how to make that work.
Right, because those late fees, those add up, right? So that's the part of it. That leads to delinquency, that leads to bankruptcy. There's a lot that goes in there in terms of the risk to you. to your financial health and to your credit score when you come right down to it. All of those affect it.
Oh, the other trap too is don't pay any interest for the next 24 months.
But that.
Right? But if you don't pay it off, all of a sudden all those 24 months of interest accrue.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a little bit of a, if you can play within the scope of the rules, it's okay. But if there's any doubt that you're going to miss that and not be able to get that done, then it's something you want to take a real hard look at before you commit.
Right, and just to go back to that, that means you're scrolling back to day one, and all of that interest that was supposed to be put on there now goes right on there at whatever interest rate they're telling you it is at that point. Like you said, it could be in the 20s in terms of a percentage.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that could be a big number that suddenly is like this unexpected huge bill that comes in to you.
Well, that's why they offer it, because they know a lot of people are going to default. Mm-hmm.
Next slide. Yeah, so, look, we talked about the reasons to have credit, right? Which is leveraging, you're using other people's money to buy things, right? And so the better your credit score, the lower the cost is going to be to you, the more leveraging you're going to have to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. And interest rates where they are, I think this is why we brought this one up for this, because of what's happened with the Federal Reserve Bank, what's happened with interest rates, where things have gone, and just looking at it from the point of that it's now costing that much more, as you said, right? Credit card rates have shot up. That average rate used to be somewhere in the middle of about 12 or 13, now is like 17 or 18 as an averaging rate.
Oh, easily, yes. Mm-hmm.
And everything, mortgages, everything has become more expensive. And having that additional weight of I've got to pay extra now on top because my credit score is low, mm-hmm. It's really becoming almost prohibitive for people to access or get money today.
Yeah, and if you're in a credit situation, it can be extremely frustrating. You can feel like you have the weight of the shoulders on, the world on your shoulders, trying to dig yourself out of this. And then even as you're digging yourself out, you feel, well, my credit score is in the toilet, so now what do I do? These are things, like I said, you can't go backwards. You got to start with where you are and see what steps can I make to move forward. I mean, on the other side, if you're not having a credit issue, are you using credit the right way? Because everybody uses credit. Even countries like the United States use credit, right? Anybody who's ever been wealthy leveraged credit in some way or another to help them advance their situation. So it's not just the people who are struggling to have to deal with credit issues, it's everybody across the board. So this is something you want to have a handle on.
Right. Next slide, please. So here's some strategies, some ideas to be thinking about as you go through this, right? So, the first one right out of the gate is always pay the bills on time. If you have to only pay the minimum just to make sure that you're paying it on time, then pay the minimum. Keep your credit card balances low. If anything, the whole idea might be to just think about, well, do I really need to open another credit card at a store type of thing instead? Trying to go through that. If you have issues, think of a way, and I don't know about using a service, but a ways of repairing your credit.
Yeah, I think the other thing to start with too is communicate with your creditor. If you are running into some kind of a financial issue, which a lot of people did over the last few years, especially if you had a good credit history in the past, communicate with them. Tens of millions of Americans are having credit issues right now. The big issue is ignoring it will make it worse. If you can have a conversation, it may delay reporting to the credit card to the Equifax or the other FICO scoring companies to help maintain your score. They may make a different payment arrangement with you. Right. There's lots of things that can be done if you're proactive. If you're just going to be reactive, then you might have more issues.
Right, and to that end, right, really thinking about keeping, let's call it I think we called it your financial house in order, right? Getting and maintaining and understanding your cash flow, understanding where the money's going, like we said, understanding how you're spending, where you're spending, what you're spending. For Craig and I, most importantly, it usually comes down to why. Mm-hmm. Why is what trips us up? Why am I spending, or why did I do this? And those are some of the things that really to get you sort of thinking about what am I doing with my spending, where is that being, and how is that pertaining to my credit score mm-hmm. with all what I am spending? Am I, can I take a break from spending basically and just pay some of this stuff off is the question that usually comes up with that. And those are some of the ideas. Next slide, we'll go into the So this is really for us, excuse me, when we say a call to action, we're like, if you've got questions, if you've got concerns, if you have issues that have come up, you just want somebody to, sort of go through it with you, that's why the foundation is here. That QR code that is on the screen, that you just take your phone out, shoot that, it's going to open up our schedule, it's going to open up our calendar, and with that you can schedule a time with either myself or Craig. It'll just pop up, and it's just, let's have a conversation. Let's just try to figure out what it is you're trying to accomplish, what is the situation that you're in, and how you're going to get yourself out of that. So that QR code, just maybe pause the set, pause this, however you're viewing this, take your phone out, shoot it right now. It'll open up the calendar. Let's have a conversation.
And let's be honest too, if you watch this whole episode up to that point, you've got some concerns or at least some questions. So why not get them answered for free by somebody who can give you some honest answers?
Right, and the tagline that was in there on that is that you can't get a second opinion from the person who set up your plan. So whoever set up your plan, whether it was you or somebody else or whatever, if it's not working, well, we should have a conversation. We should try to figure that out. Should try to, at least go through that. So take the second, take the time and go through it. And last slide for us, this is other ways to reach out to us. So we told you that the website, it's ariesfoundation.org. That's got the /contact. If you just go to ariesfoundation.org, it'll open up the website. You can see the contact page is on there. But if you just type in ariesfoundation.org /contact, you'll get to the contact page, and we're certainly happy to reach out to you that way. The scheduler, if you didn't shoot the QR code, that's the actual link that's on there. You can just copy that or paste it right off the screen, and just that'll open up the calendar as well. The email is info@ariesfoundation.org. We're happy to answer questions by email if you want to reach out to us that way. And then, because we're trying to pump up the Instagram channel, give us a little bit of credibility on Instagram, if you do happen to spend time on Instagram or go anything like that, like us, follow us, do whatever you're supposed to do with those videos or posts on Instagram, because we're happy to try to figure that out and see if there's anything that we can do to try to help you out. So again, real quickly with that, credit is very important. You need to be thinking about credit. You need to be using credit. You need to be doing it in such a way that you are bettering your situation, not taking away from it, not lowering yourself. And then there are times that all of us can just, take a step back and figure out what it is we want to do. Yeah. So that's credit in a nutshell.
Yeah, credit is like any other tool, like a hammer. If you use it correctly, it does great things. If you use it wrong, you're going to bash your thumbs. So let's not bash our thumbs. Let's have a conversation.
All right, everybody, skål.